Well, welcome to the Gramophone Listening Room podcast, presented in partnership with DCS Audio. I'm Charlotte Gardner, and if you heard the first edition of this series with Anastasia Kobakina and Plinio Fernandez, then you will know that this is about exploring some of the treasures of the recording archive through the ears and player perspectives of some of today's finest younger generation artists. 2 guests per podcast, each of whom gets to nominate 2 recordings that mean a great deal to them and explain why and what it is they love. And because we're Gramophone, they are allowed, nay encouraged, to go as detailed and techie as they like. I will then throw in a recording of my own. Then once you've listened or watched, you can find the accompanying playlist with the full versions of all of our choices on the Gramophone website, next to the links for the audio and video of the podcast itself. And if you spot us swapping headphones, that's because the person whose choice it is gets to listen to their choice on this magnificent DCS Lina system that we've got on the table here. So, time now to welcome today's pair of guests, 2 artists who each have sizable discographies of their own. Viola player Timothy Ridout, or should I say maybe multi-Gramophone Award-winning Timothy Ridout, and trumpeter Matilda Lloyd, who, among many things, is the Royal Philharmonic Society's 2026 Young Artist of the Year. Welcome, both of you. Let's leap straight in. Tim, what's your first choice?
My first choice is a Telemann violin concerto performed by Isabel Faust and the Academy for Alte Musik Berlin.
We'll leap in straight away and hear it, but just before we do, give us like a nugget, a listening point. Tell us what to listen to just to begin with.
Well, you'll hear when we start listening to this, it starts sort of what do you expect from a Telemann violin concerto? It's very beautiful, it's very sort of effervescent, very lively. And then suddenly the solo violin comes in and it's absolutely crazy. You just have to hear it.
Okay, well, let's hear it now. It's a magnificent moment when Faust enters, isn't it? I mean, this is not a track that you can play straight less. You have to have funny bones in order to do it justice, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we often think of Vivaldi as being the sort of composer of that era who really did wild things and painted these amazing pictures with music. But Telemann was so prolific, and so much of his works just not really known, not really discovered. And I mean, Isabel, I'm always in awe and always surprised by what she does and how varied the tonal colors are which she can get out of the violin.
So what was it that made you pick this particular track, this particular album? I mean, with the whole recording catalogue at your fingertips to bring into the discussion today, was it about the repertoire? Was it about the performers, or a bit of both? What does the recording mean to you?
Well, yeah, both. I mean, it was very difficult given this task of choosing 2 recordings with so many thousands of incredible recordings to choose from. I think for both of my choices today, I wanted to shine a light on 2 composers, so Telemann and York Bowen, who are sort of unjustly, in my opinion, not given their dues. And I mean, Isabel Faust is someone I'm very lucky to collaborate with from time to time, and I've admired her recordings for many, many years. I think every disc she does is just impeccable. And this is a fairly recent release, which I sort of stumbled across, I think, actually on one of these sort of, I think this was a pre-release track for the album when it came out from Harmonium and and I listened to that, and then I listened to the whole album, and just every single concerto, overture, suite on the album is just a gem.
The capturing is wonderful as well. I was noticing, I mean, it's bristling out of the stereo.
Yeah.
How do you come to recordings for the first time? Are you somebody who is actually keeping an eye on new releases, or do you stumble across something because your streaming service has fed it to you, or it's recommendations from friends?
A bit of, I mean, all of those things. I mean, I don't have so much time to listen to music, unfortunately, because I spend so much time playing it, and
That's
then
hard why I asked, actually.
exactly.
How do you?
So I mean, I'm very sure often I miss great things. There's so many great things coming out, and I'm sure I miss a lot of it. Absolutely, some of it's coming through friends, and some of it is coming through the performers that I personally know, and seeing that they've released an album. Sometimes is from streaming services as well, but I'm very glad that I caught this one, because it's just magnificent, I think.
Are you at all listening to it from a viola player perspective?
Good question. No, actually, I love to listen to a lot of early music, actually, but I play relatively little early music, and so I don't think about it so much as a player and how that is actually. I just think of it as the sort of this joyous music, which just sounds really great, and I love that sound world.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I find that when I listen to jazz music and when I listen to amazing jazz trumpet players, I can also kind of switch off my trumpet playing brain
Interesting.
and just listen to it, because I'm personally not a jazz musician.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So what does it take for you to be able to switch off? Is it just it being a different genre entirely?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, let's move to your first choice. What is it? And give us a little nugget before we...
This is a piece called Miserere by James Macmillan, and it is sung by the 16.
So beautiful. Why did you pick that?
Well, for me, this whole album was one of the first choral experiences that I had actually in a concert hall. I was, I think, 16 or 17 years old, and it was at King's Place, and this was the 16 choral pilgrimage. And I had known Harry Christophers for a while because I grew up in the same area that he lives in. And because I had been so immersed in the trumpet world and in kind of orchestral symphonic music my whole childhood and teenage years, I hadn't ever really heard a choir sing like that. And this album weaves James Macmillan's works with Palestrina and also the Allegre Miserere. And so we hear this same text from the Miserere by three different composers in three completely different ways. And I was just so struck by how they were it was interwoven, and at some points you couldn't even tell whether you were listening to Palestrina or James Macmillan, and then something would give it away, and all these amazing kind of clues. And yeah, it was just a profound experience for me. And I went on to study a lot of early choral music and polyphony when I was at Cambridge. So it really sort of unlocked this whole world that I didn't really know existed.
And of course, later that piece quotes Allegre's Miserere as well, which means a lot to me actually from my Cambridge Chapel Choir days. It was one of the favourite pieces that I used to sing. How much are you thinking about vocal singing technique when you are playing the trumpet? I mean, are you at all approaching that from a trumpeter perspective, or is it just completely different?
I think there are more similarities than people might realize. Of course, the actual production of sound is different in the sense that with the trumpet, we're using the vibration of the lips. And obviously with singing, it's like speaking, it's with the vocal cords. So the sound production is different. But I do think, obviously, the way in which we're using the body and the way that we're using air and breathing is very similar, in the sense that everything needs to be quite relaxed and open in order to make a good sound, to get that real resonance. And also the way that trumpeters use their tongue for the articulation, I think, is very similar to the way that we have to use our tongue to create consonants and diction and sounds. So I do think there are quite a lot of similarities there.
And there was a lovely, Tim, very interested to know what you made of that recording when you were listening to it as well. One of the things that struck me, I mean, always with choral recordings, I'm listening to the acoustic and imagining just the space that this music is in. And one of the joys of choral recordings is that they are genuinely recorded, not in a studio, but in a wonderful church. And you felt the walls in that one.
I was just thinking about that, how incredibly beautiful the sound it is. And of course, the singers themselves are phenomenal. But then the way the human voice resonates in the space is just so incredibly beautiful.
I've been quite lucky to record in both environments, actually. I've recorded in churches and also in more conventional concert halls and studios. And I have to say that with the trumpet, getting the resonance and being able to play into such a big space in a church is one of my favourite things.
Well, let's leap actually on that point with a wider angle question for both of you now, given that sound quality is very much at the top of our minds here because we're sat with this wonderful DCS digital audio converter Lena system. Let's talk about the capturing of your instruments. Viola, trumpet, very different. I imagine that there are different things you have to be aware of when you're capturing them. Perhaps could each of you give us a few kernels of information about what are the challenges and the pleasures you have found capturing your respective instruments?
Yeah, so with the trumpet, I would say the most difficult thing and the most important thing is getting the balance right between the amount of the audio that you're capturing in the room, so the resonance of the instrument, and the amount that you're capturing from a much closer microphone. So, for example, there are the mechanical noises of the instrument, putting the valves down and slides going in and out. And then there's also the mechanical noises of me actually physically playing the instrument, so breathing. And I think it's really nice to be able to hear some of the breaths in music, because for me, the music actually starts with the breath and with the silence before it. And with wind instruments and trumpet playing, often the breath is sort of leading you in and kind of starts off the intention.
I would imagine that there's only so close you can mic a trumpet sensibly is very different to stringed instruments.
Exactly. I was going to ask Tim, like, do you have a microphone much closer to the instrument than I can imagine I would?
How far away what is the sort of the distance?
Probably
that
at
is
least
safe?
a meter away from the end of the
Okay.
bell of the
So,
instrument.
so interesting because I was expecting our answers to be very different because our instruments are so different. They produce sound in a different way. They produce different volumes and quantities of sound, and yet actually the challenges are almost exactly the same. The mixture of how much you want to hear the bite of the bow on the string and the sort of crackle of the rosin and the left hand hitting the thing versus the beautiful resonance, which is what the audience gets in the hall. And actually the question of breathing also ends up being quite the same, that I think to even just put your bow on the string, it has to be related to breath, whether that's inhaling or exhaling, depending on the sort of technical facets.
How do you breathe when you play?
Well, I think the most key thing is that depending on the ensemble, let's say it's duo recording, which is what I've done quite a bit of. Normally, it would be me giving the sort of lead, unless there's a sort of piano introduction beforehand. And in that case, I would tend to inhale. I would tend to exhale, perhaps if I want to play something very soft, then I'd find it easier to gently place my bow on the string with my lungs more empty. But generally, to inhale to start the phrase, I think it's quite similar to singing or with my very, very limited knowledge playing a wind or brass instrument.
It feels natural.
Yeah.
Do either of you ever worry about too much breath on a recording? I mean, speaking as a recordings critic, one of the things that can sometimes be a bugbear is when you have a beautiful piece of music and actually there is too much performer breath.
Mm-hmm. I guess we have in that sense we probably have a difference that whilst you're playing, you can't be actively making other breathing noise during the phrase. It's before and after the phrase, and I guess for you. Whereas as a string player, there is a danger that you can have too much breathing noise. I think there's only one album of my own where I really got in danger with that, and that's because I was recording in an absolutely beautiful place in the south of France, which was a converted sort of, I think, a cotton factory or some sort of mill converted into a recording venue. But it was the middle of summer in the south of France, and it was extremely hot. And I think that was just making me breathe more than usual and sweat more than usual. And I remember also it was this passionate program. It was a recording I did with Prokofiev and Schumann, and there's so much emotion and stuff. And I think occasionally the producer did mention to me that we might want to be just a little bit careful about the quantity of breathing. But generally, if the room is well temperature regulated, it's not so much a problem.
Well, do you know what? Let's stick with viola repertoire and move to your second choice. What is it?
Great. So my second choice is the final movement of the Viola Sonata number 2 by Edwin York Bowen.
Right.
Just how hard is it to play that piece?
It's not particularly easy. And sorry, I should have mentioned before we played the I should have mentioned who the performers are, because it's an extremely excellent performance. And that was Lawrence Power at the viola and Simon Crawford Phillips playing the piano. I mean, and they recorded this double disc. There's about 2 hours of music by York Bowen for viola and piano, two sonatas, and loads of short pieces. And all of it is quite virtuosic, quite challenging, and filled with so much color, adventure, fantasy. Yeah, and I guess that's what I find so impressive is not the technical difficulties, but the mastering of the technical difficulties with so much fantasy, charm, and character.
So what does this album and this particular recording mean to you as a whole? I mean, York Bowen isn't massively recorded, but that was not the only recording of the second sonata you could have picked. So what led you to it?
So I first came across this recording when I was about 14 years old, and that was thanks to my viola teacher at the time, Jonathan Barrett, who was principal viola of the English Chamber Orchestra.
This is a 2008 recording, I should say, on Hyperion.
Yes, exactly. So it must have just come out the year before, or 1 or 2 years. It was a new recording at that time, and I remember listening to it and just being amazed by the music because I'd never heard of York Bowen, and amazed by the viola playing. And then through those years, I was fortunate to hear Lawrence, often also with Simon, at the Wigmore Hall, playing lots of different programs. And I think both, I really chose this recording equally for the sheer beauty, brilliance, and quality of the playing and the music, because I think Bowen really deserves to be better known. He was born at the end of the 19th century and then lived right through to the middle of the 20th century. But most of his compositional output is from the years up until the end of the First World War, the sort of first 2 decades of the 20th century. And I think his music sort of really lived in this time of Edwardian Britain, and it was, in my opinion, the sort of the best of it. It seems to encapsulate the wonderful things that were present in the world at that time, for all the problems that also existed. But I adore his sense of fantasy and taking, in a way, something quite simple but making it so charming and so it's almost flirtatious. The music is just filled with this sort of capricious energy.
Absolutely, there's sort of debonair quirkiness about it, and there are so many different moods and styles happening in that same sonata rather. I mean, we came out of it just before it went into an entirely different landscape.
Yes.
Matilda, what did you think of it?
Yeah, so I actually did know of York Bowen because I played some of his piano pieces. One of his pieces was in my grade 8 exam, one of his preludes. So I knew his piano music better, but I had never heard this piece before, and I really enjoyed listening to it. Actually, later on in the track, I especially love when it breaks out into the little fugue when it kind of returns to the main thing. I thought that was so clever.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the cheekiness. It almost sounds a little bit like a sort of traditional English folk tune that he then has sort of reworked. And I really loved that, the rhythmic kind of energy in the music.
Well, tell us about your second choice.
So my second choice is a little bit different. It is called Elegy by Rolf Wollin, is the composer, and it is performed by Håkan Hardenberger and the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields Orchestra.
Right, let's have a listen. just beautiful. Matilda, why did you choose that one?
So I chose this particular album because, well, for me as a trumpet soloist, Håkan Hardenberger was always my biggest inspiration growing up. And I was lucky enough to meet him and then study with him extensively in Sweden. And I think it's very easy to pigeonhole him into this contemporary music world with all these crazy new commissions that he has performed the premieres of, and, you know, doing all these kind of crazy extended techniques and high notes and all these weird and wacky, wonderful things with the trumpet. But at his core, I think he really is all about the music and the emotions and the sound. And so what I love about this album, Both Sides Now, is that I think it is just a real exploration into the sound of the trumpet and the power of the sound and the emotion in the sound of the trumpet. I think it's a very raw instrument, and I think it really can make people feel things just by its sound.
What really struck me about the recording, speaking as somebody who does not play the trumpet, was actually precisely the sound and the range of expressions that he was able to put through just blowing into that brass mouthpiece. How is he creating that? I mean, with my recorder playing background, I was hearing the way he was using the air, the width of the sound was expanding and contracting.
Yes.
There was a radiance up the top, and then he was able to do something very cloaked underneath. How is he doing all of that?
Well, as you say, it's about using the airflow in a very different way. Håkan has always encouraged me to think of creating sound with the trumpet sideways and backwards, rather than sort of trying to pin right to the back of the concert hall, you know, pin someone to the back. And it's about manipulating the airflow in various different ways. The speed of the air, especially, and in terms of, I like to think about creating warm air through the trumpet, like as if you were misting up a mirror, rather than sort of blowing really hard and fast air. So you really can create all these different kinds of sound with one instrument.
It's so interesting because we were just speaking about how to make the instrument and what to look for, and so that was really in the forefront of my mind as we were listening to this extremely beautiful recording. And I was just thinking about also the qualities, the different qualities of the articulation and the way of using vibrato or not, and such a beautiful variation of tonal quality that
Yeah, I think with trumpet playing, it's important to be really intentional with vibrato. I think the tradition of brass banding, for example, there is one very specific way of doing a vibrato, but to really use it as a expressive tool, I think, is very important.
And the programming on this album as well. I mean, it's an album, a work of art as an entity. I mean, we picked one track, but it's about more than that here, isn't it?
Absolutely. And again, this is an album that I've heard live. I actually performed with Håkan in a concert with the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields 2 years ago. And it started off with Telemann. I joined him for the Telemann Triple Trumpet Concerto, and then he played the Haydn Concerto, which is our most famous work. And then the second half of the concert, he performed tracks from this album, and it acted like a giant decrescendo from the Telemann through the Haydn all the way down, and he ended with the Oblivion, which is the first track on this album, where he has the Harmon mute in, and it was just the most. There wasn't a dry eye in the room.
Wow. Well, oh no, go on, Tim, go on.
No. Just observing it is such an interesting way of programming for a concert or an album, and such a beautiful perspective on making music.
Well, let's see whether I can moisten a few eyes. It's my turn. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Want your responses, gut reaction. Here it is.
Will come
It pains me to stop that. Do you want me to tell you who and what now, or do you want to react to it first?
I want to first know when was it recorded.
1946.
I love being able to hear that it's not
Yeah.
a recent recording. I love that you can hear the kind of the crackles and the...
So you go on.
Yeah, sure. Okay. It's it's Handel's aria Art Thou Troubled from Rosalinda, 1946. Kathleen Ferrier with the London Symphony Orchestra and Sir Malcolm Sargent. I will tell you what I think of it. What did you think of it? Beyond the crackle.
It was super beautiful. I mean, such I sort of instantly recognized it as Handel, though I didn't know this aria. And firstly, there's thoughts about the music itself. It's so beautiful. There's such a distinctive melodic shaping that Handel has. And then what also struck me is this older approach to playing Baroque music, which is so beautiful. Is something we've kind of lost in a sense now. And there's so much I love about the sort of period instrument movement. But I also love this sort of, I don't know. I wish I had a better vocabulary to describe it. But there's something about the sort of softness and the beauty of the string playing, which is right, and the singing, of course, extremely beautiful.
I thought her legato between notes, I thought was absolutely spectacular. It's something that I talk a lot about with my students, actually, is thinking and taking care of the music that happens between the notes. And sometimes they look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language. They're like, what do you mean the music between the notes? But I think actually the way that she sang that is a really wonderful example of taking care of that space as you're changing from one note to another to create this magical legato.
I'm so glad you love it. And interestingly, you both have picked up on things that I love about the recording. It's funny, I first came across this aria when I was a teenager doing ABRSM singing exams, and I just didn't get it at that point. And this was in the days before streaming, and I wish in my early teens I had heard this recording, and I think that would have made such a difference to me. One of the things that I love about historical recordings is like popping the cork on a bottle of a bygone age's emotions and modes of expressing them in a far more visceral way than you will get from a newsreel or a film. And I mean, here we are in 1946, everyone was troubled. And yet here is Ferrier with her rich contralto voice singing Music Shall Calm Thee, and the LSO and Sargent just right by her side in every way. And there's this direct way of communicating. Oh my gosh, the clarity of her diction. If she hadn't been a singer, she could have been a World Service continuity announcer. And it's also just about the control and the dignity. And it's suave, but it's not too suave. I mean, she sometimes leans into a word, and it's almost a little bit clunky because it's about expression. She wants to, this is the word that she feels powerful about. And the warmth of the orchestra, and as you say, the slides between notes. There's a downwards portamento when she sings Music Calls Them just after about 1:30. It's very period. You wouldn't really do it now, but it's just glorious. And there are all sorts of other just glorious little scoops, which is, I think there is something that we have lost there. And I think also just in general, with Kathleen Ferrier, folk songs were a massive part of her repertoire, and I think that folk song is something that we've also lost a little bit in our day of age. Just that shared knowledge of the songs of our nation and our regions. I think probably when she was singing this, everybody would have just known "Blow the Wind Southerly" or dashing away with a smoothing iron. I would love us to be in the world where that was the case again, I guess.
And the shared culture of singing as well is just such a beautiful thing, which has also been sadly lost a lot in our society.
I love what you said at the beginning there about it really being a snapshot of that moment in time. And I think really that applies to all recordings. And I don't know about you, Tim, but like when I go and if I ever have to listen back to my own recordings, there's always a million things you think, oh, I would do this differently now and this differently. But I think it's a really nice way to look back on recordings as a snapshot of that artist in that time at that moment and treat it like that.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. That's the exact advice which one of my teachers, when I was making my very first debut album, I was so stressed about wanting to make my definitive version of that repertoire. And I was 20 or 21 years old. And I remember he said to me, just think of it as a snapshot of your performance of that piece today or this year. And that took away so much of the impression, the pressure exactly of making this. Which is a beautiful attitude towards it.
That is a really interesting point, that snapshots of time, for the listener, they're not just about the ancient recordings, they are about the modern ones too. Particularly, I think in the world today, we live in interesting times, and I think probably every recording that's being made now, there will be a history attached that people will be listening to in a decade from now. Tim, Matilda, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure. Just a reminder, you can find the accompanying playlist with the full versions of our choices, plus the podcast audio and film on the Gramophone website. That's all from me, Charlotte Gardner. This was the Gramophone Listening Room podcast in partnership with DCS Audio. Thank you for listening, and stand by for another episode in the near future.